Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. If you're anything like me, you are probably feeling a little burned out on the headlines. We have had, what, 3 straight years of game-changing AI announcements every other week. At this point, I think we're all a bit desensitized. You see a headline about a new chatbot, and you just think, great, it can write a slightly better email than the last one.
It's definitely getting harder to separate the signal from the noise.
Yeah.
I mean, we are just drowning in press releases.
Exactly. But today, we are ignoring the marketing hype. We are ignoring the stock prices. We're going to open up the hood and look at two specific papers that I think they actually signal a massive shift. We aren't talking about making the models bigger anymore. We're asking a much more uncomfortable question. Can these things actually think? Or have they just been faking it really well for the last few years?
That is the trillion-dollar question, isn't it? And what's so fascinating about the research we have today is that it suggests we've been building AI, well, fundamentally wrong for complex reasoning. And the fix might look a lot more like us.
So lay it out for us. What are the two pieces of evidence we are examining today?
Okay, so first, we have a report from Ken Wasserman, published back in August 2025. It details something they call a virtual lab. This is really the peak of what the current generation of AI can do if you sort of force it to collaborate.
The brute force approach, basically.
In a sense, yes. It involves AI agents acting as a team to cure diseases. And then for the second half, we're going to pivot to a paper from Sapient Intelligence in Singapore. They've developed something called the HRM, the Hierarchical Reasoning Model.
And this is the one that really grabbed me, because if the first story is about what AI can do today, the second story feels like the blueprint for what comes next. A tiny, efficient model that mimics the human brain and somehow beats the absolute giants of the industry at logic puzzles.
It's a classic David versus Goliath story, but, with neural architecture.
Love it. Okay, let's start with that virtual lab, this Wasserman report. When I read virtual lab, I'm picturing like a VR headset and a joystick. But that's not what this is it?
No, not at all. The concept here is shifting away from the idea of a single chatbot. You know how usually you type a prompt into ChatGPT or Claude and it just spits back an answer?
Sure. One-on-one interaction.
Wasserman's team said, that's not how science gets done. Science happens in teams. So they built a system of multiple LLM agents, and they gave them job titles.
Job titles, like literal employment contracts.
Digital ones, essentially. You have one agent assigned the role of principal investigator. That's the lead scientist. His job isn't to run experiments. Its job is to plan, to manage the budget, to guide the research direction.
The manager, the one who sends all the emails.
And the one who sees the big picture. Then you have other agents assigned as scientists. They are the ones actually executing the tasks, running the numbers, proposing experiments.
Okay, pause for a second. When you say they work together, are they actually talking to each other? Or is there a human, copy-pasting text between different windows?
That's the cool part. They are talking to each other. They hold research meetings. The principal investigator agent sets a goal. The scientist agents propose a plan. They critique each other's ideas, and they iterate. They even use external tools like AlphaFold and molecular dynamics simulations, all on their own.
That sounds, okay, I'll be the skeptic. That sounds like a really fun video game, like The Sims Biotech Edition.
Yeah.
But did it actually accomplish anything, or was it just bots chatting about protein structures?
It wasn't a game. They had a very specific, very hard mission. Design nanobodies to target SARS-CoV-2.
Right, nanobodies. Those are the small antibodies from llamas and sharks, right?
Correct. They're easier to produce than full antibodies. The team gave the AI 4 known nanobodies, old ones, that worked on the original COVID strain, but were failing against newer variants. The instruction was basically, you are the scientists. Evolve these, make them work against the new variants.
So the AI had to figure out how to mutate these proteins to fight a moving target.
Exactly. And the agents didn't just guess. They planned. They simulated. And in the end, they designed 92 new nanobody candidates.
92 candidates is great, but a candidate isn't a cure.
And this is where the rubber meets the road. Human researchers took those designs out of the computer and synthesized them in a physical wet lab. They actually made the molecules. They worked. Specifically, the AI created mutants that successfully neutralized recent variants like JN.1 and KP.3. These are variants that were notoriously good at evading our older defenses.
That is wild. So the AI took an old weapon, analyzed the new enemy, and upgraded the weapon, all without a human holding its hand.
Exactly. It combined knowledge from immunology, protein folding, machine learning. It's what we call interdisciplinary science, but performed entirely by software agents.
That is incredible. It really changes the view of AI from a tool like a calculator to a colleague. But I'm sensing a but coming.
You know me well.
This virtual lab, it requires a lot of heavy lifting, doesn't it?
It does. You are running multiple massive large language models at the same time. The compute cost is high. The energy cost is high. It's effective, but it is brute force. It's like hiring 100 geniuses to change a light bulb.
Which brings us to our second story. Because while the virtual lab is throwing massive compute at the problem, researchers in Singapore are asking a different question, like, are these massive models actually smart, or are they just paradoxically shallow?
This is the pivot to the Sapient Intelligence paper on the Hierarchical Reasoning Model, or HRM. And they start with a pretty scathing critique of the the transformers that run GPT, Gemini, all of them.
Paradoxically shallow is a great insult. It sounds like something you'd say about an ex-boyfriend. What do they mean by that?
Well, think about how a transformer works. It predicts the next word. It's incredible at pattern matching. If I say, the cat sat on it knows the next word is probably Matt. But the paper argues that for complex reasoning, this architecture just hits a wall. They struggle with problems that require polynomial time reasoning.
Okay, stop there. Polynomial time. Phew. We promise no jargon without translation. Give me the non-math version of that.
Think of it like the difference between a reflex and a strategy. I toss a set of keys to you, you catch them. You don't think about physics, your brain just reacts. That's fast, that's linear.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now imagine I ask you to plan the seating chart for a wedding where half the guests hate each other.
Oh, nightmare scenario.
Right. You can't just react to that. You have to plan. You say, okay, I'm March here. Oh, wait, then she's near Uncle Bob. That's bad. Let's move her to table 4, but now table 4 is too crowded. You have to think steps ahead, realize a mistake, backtrack, and try a different path. That is polynomial time reasoning.
And current AIs are bad at the wedding seating chart.
They are terrible at it. They try to one-shot it. They try to predict the whole seating chart in one go, like they're catching the keys.
But wait, haven't we fixed this with chain of thought? We tell the AI, think step by step.
The Sapient team argues that chain of thought is a crutch. It helps, sure. But fundamentally, the model is still just predicting the next token. It doesn't have a stable workspace in its brain to hold the plan, modify it, and execute it. It's faking the planning process using language patterns.
So Sapient Intelligence decided to look at the only machine in the universe that is good at wedding planning, the human brain.
Correct. They looked at neuroscience. And the big takeaway from the brain is that it is not one giant blob of neurons all doing the same thing. It is hierarchical.
Meaning there are layers of management.
In a way, yeah. The brain has high-level areas. Think of the frontal cortex that handle abstract goals. I need to solve this puzzle. This operates slowly. Then you have low-level areas that handle the details and execution. These operate very fast.
And they operate at different speeds.
Yes. Brainwaves show this. You have slow theta waves for the big picture and fast gamma waves for the details.
So how did they build this into a computer?
They built an architecture with 2 distinct modules. An H module, high level, and an L module, low level.
Let's call them the manager and the worker.
That works perfectly. The manager sets a goal. It updates slowly. It says, figure out this section of the maze. Then it pauses.
And the worker takes over.
The worker runs a fast loop. It tries things, iterates, executes the details. It works until it reaches a small result, what they call a local equilibrium. Then, and only then, does it report back to the manager.
So the manager isn't micromanaging. It waits for the result, then updates the whole plan.
Precisely. This is called hierarchical convergence. It's a loop. Manager plans, worker executes, worker reports back, manager updates plan.
This sounds efficient, but isn't training something like this a nightmare? I've heard that recurrent networks, ones that loop back on themselves, are really hard to teach because they have to remember everything.
Usually, yes. It's a problem called backpropagation through time. To learn, the computer usually has to remember every single step it took. It's like trying to learn how to play tennis by remembering the exact position of your muscle fibers for every millisecond of a match. It's just too much data.
Your brain would explode.
Exactly. So the Sapient team used a trick called one-step gradient approximation. Without getting too bogged down in the math, it allows the model to learn from the current state without needing a perfect memory of the entire history. It learns using constant memory over the bunch.
So it's scalable. It doesn't get slower the longer it thinks.
Right, which makes it biologically plausible and also computationally efficient.
Okay, so we have a brain-inspired manager-worker bot. Now we get to the part that blew my mind, the benchmarks. Because usually when we talk about efficient models, we mean, cheap and kind of dumb.
That is the expectation.
Yeah.
But this is a David versus Goliath story. First, let's talk size. The leading models today, GPT-4o, Claude 3.7, have hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of parameters.
Math?
The HRM model from this paper, 27 million parameters.
Wait, 27 million, that's a rounding error. That's smaller than the AI that runs autocomplete on my phone.
It is tiny. And it was trained on only 1,000 examples.
So it's tiny and it barely went to school. How could it possibly compete?
Well, they put it in the ring against Claude, a 3.7, O3 Mini High, and DeepSeek R1, the heavyweights.
Yeah.
Let's look at the Sudoku Extreme test. These aren't the easy ones. These require serious backtracking and logic. The big models, when asked to solve these directly, 0.0% accuracy.
They failed completely.
Completely. Couldn't do it. The HRM, it scored 55%, and with more time, it went even higher.
That is embarrassing for the big models. A 27 million parameter model beat them.
Crushed them. And it happened again on the maze test. They gave the AIs a 30 by 30 grid maze. The big model, 0.0. They just hallucinated a path through the walls. Duran scored 74.5%.
Okay, I need to visualize this. When you say it solved the maze, how do we know it wasn't just getting lucky?
The paper includes visualizations of the thought process. This is the best part. When you watch the big models, they just barrel forward and hit a wall. When you watch the HRM, you see the worker module exploring a path, hitting a dead end, and then, crucially, backtracking.
It actually turns around.
It effectively resets the worker, goes back to the last decision point, and tries the other path. It learned the algorithm for maze solving. It didn't just memorize the map, it learned how to be a navigator.
That is a fundamental difference. One is predicting text, the other is running a logic program it taught itself.
Exactly. And this leads to another concept they discuss, inference scaling.
This is the thinking fast and slow idea, right?
Yes. Humans have adaptive compute time. If I ask you what is 2 plus 2, you answer instantly. If I ask you what is 14 times 27, you stop. You pause. You allocate more mental resources.
Let me think about it.
Standard LLMs are bad at this. They usually use the same amount of compute for every token. But HRM has a mechanism to decide when to halt and when to continue thinking. And here's the kicker. If you force the model to think longer during the test phase, just give it more steps, its accuracy goes up.
Even if it wasn't trained to take that long.
Correct. It scales on inference. It's like telling a student during an exam, hey, you have an extra hour, check your work. And they actually use that time to find mistakes and fix them.
Whereas a standard LLM would just use that extra hour to hallucinate a more elaborate wrong answer.
Precisely. It implies the model has internalized a robust method for reasoning that extends beyond its training data.
Now, there's one last thing from this paper we have to touch on because it feels like something out of a sci-fi novel. The mouse-brain connection.
This was the cherry on top for me. So, neuroscientists use a metric called dimensionality to measure how complex brain activity is.
Explain that like I'm 5, or maybe 12.
Okay, imagine a messy desk versus a filing cabinet.
I have a messy desk, so I relate.
A messy desk is like the sensory part of your brain, low dimensionality. It's cluttered, specific, lots of individual items, pixels, sounds everywhere. It's hard to generalize from that mess.
Okay.
The higher level planning part of your brain is like a well-organized filing cabinet. High dimensionality. It abstracts things into categories and concepts. It's structured.
So our brains physically organize information differently depending on if we are sensing or thinking.
Yes. And here's the shocker. They analyzed the HRM's brain after training. They measured the dimensionality of the signals in the manager module versus the worker module.
And they didn't program this in.
No, they just let it learn. And the HRM spontaneously organized itself exactly like a biological brain. The manager module had extremely high dimensionality, the filing cabinet. The worker module had low dimensionality, the messy desk.
It evolved the same structure as a mouse brain because that's the most efficient way to solve problems?
Exactly. Convergent evolution. Biology found this structure millions of years ago. The AI found it last August. It suggests that if you want true intelligence, you need this separation of abstract planning and detailed execution. You can't just mash it all into one big transformer.
Honestly, that gives me goosebumps. It feels like we are looking at the discovery of a law of physics, but for intelligence.
It certainly feels that way.
So let's zoom out. We started with the virtual lab AI agents working together to cure diseases, proving that collaboration and role-playing can unlock new capabilities right now. Then we looked at the HRM, a tiny 27 million parameter model that beats the absolute giants at logic because it's built like a brain, not a text predictor.
And the synthesis here is that the era of just make it bigger might be over. For the last 3 years, the strategy has been more data, more GPUs, trillion-dollar clusters.
Mm.
But HRM suggests that architecture matters more than size. Being smarter is better than being bigger.
It's not about how big your brain is, it's about how you organize your filing cabinet.
A perfect summary. We are moving towards systems that are hierarchical, efficient, and capable of genuine planning.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to chew on. We just saw a model with 27 million parameters, a digital gnat, outperform the state of the art.
It raises the obvious question.
What happens when we scale this up? What happens when we take this hierarchical brain-mimicking architecture and give it the training data of a GPT-5? If a tiny version can beat Claude at logic, are we looking at the actual blueprint for AGI?
It's a thrilling possibility. If we combine the vast knowledge base of a large language model with the reasoning capability of this hierarchical reasoning model, we might finally bridge the gap between knowing and thinking.
And that is a future I am very excited and maybe a tiny bit terrified to see unfold. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of thought.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Keep asking questions, keep learning, and stay curious. We'll see you next time.